liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Hello, folks. This is Point of View. This is Kirby Anderson's show. And you're right, you don't hear the melodious strains of Kirby Anderson's voice again today because you got Louis Gohmert, the lowly legislator from Texas. I am just honored to be in Kirby's chair. I can't fill his shoes, but I can sit in his chair. So, and I've got such a great crew here at Point of View. They always keep me, so far, they've always been able to keep me out of trouble, and they're nodding in there that they're going to do it again today. But we have a fantastic show, and it could be a historic show, and it could be such a tremendous help to so many, both informative and other issues that we hit during the show. But we hit an important issue this week in Congress that I didn't know until after Carrie Renee Hunt Dunn was murdered by her estranged husband in a hotel room December 2013. I didn't realize there was a problem, but multi-line telephone systems like you have in a hotel, and that actually most offices have, multi-lines where you dial 9 or 7 or some other number to get an outside line. I'd never thought about the problem that if somebody in a hotel room needed to dial immediately for emergency and dial 911, that they wouldn't go straight to an emergency trained personnel, that it actually would not go anywhere. But that's exactly what happened back December 2013. Carrie was just a precious young woman, and she was bringing children to visit with their father at a hotel room, and he ended up having evil intent. He yanked her in the restroom. He was assaulting her, he beating, stabbing, and it went on for several minutes, although a ridiculous paper decided to interview him in prison. And he said, well, yeah, I wasn't assaulting her more than 5 minutes or so I don't think if the emergency personnel had gotten there, it would have mattered. Well, it probably was 5 to 10 minutes. She was not dead when the emergency personnel got there. It appears pretty clear. If her 9-year-old daughter, who dialed 911 repeatedly, had gotten through when she first tried, her mother might be alive. That little girl is a hero. We don't talk about her name, but I am honored to have on the show with us today Hank Hunt, Carrie Renee's father, and he has not let this go. He brought it to my attention, and we have pushed and pushed. I don't like legislating in areas where it's not a federal issue, but telephone systems across the country or interstate commerce. And it turned out when we got into it, we got help from the American Hotel and Lodging Association. We got help from one of the FCC commissioners, Commissioner Pye, just a wonderful man that saw the problem. And due to Hank's pushing and Hank's leadership and his willingness to go wherever he needed to go in the country, including Washington, D.C., we got a bill not only written, but we got co-sponsors, and we passed it in the House on Monday night this week. We have a Democrat as the lead sponsor. My dear friend Ted Cruz is pushing it as well in the Senate, and it looks like there's a good chance it will become law. But welcome to the show, Carrie Renee Hunt's father, Hank Hunt. Hank, welcome to Point of View.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate the invite.
Well, Hank, you are a testimonial to what can be done still in the United States of America when there's a problem and one person takes it so seriously and makes it a mission and gets it dealt with. Our bill, turns out it doesn't cost a bunch of money, not taxpayer money, doesn't cost any there. It doesn't cost a bunch of money for multi-line telephone system manufacturers, because for years, it turns out, after you start pushing the issue, that they've been producing telephone systems that can easily, just as easily, be set up to have 911 go directly to emergency personnel. But I would really like for you to tell our listeners about, and this is what really got me, when your granddaughter explained to you what she had done. Can you tell that to our listeners, what she told you about what she tried to do there in the hotel room when her mother was being assaulted?
Well, that's probably one of the worst parts of the whole story and the whole events that day. We were at the police station still. My ex-son-in-law, I prefer to call him ex.
Yeah, I understand.
Had taken one of the children and ran, and we had an Amber Alert out. Excuse me. Several times we did an Amber Alert, and we ended up getting her back safe and sound. But during that time at the police station, she was sitting on my lap. She's 9 years old, and I asked her what happened, and I said, "You called 911," and she said, "I tried." And I asked her, "What do you mean you tried?" She said, "I tried 4 times, but it wouldn't work." And I said, "Well, I don't understand why it wouldn't work." She said, she shrugged her shoulders. She goes, "It didn't work." And then it dawned on me that she didn't know to dial a prefix number to get an outside line. And that very second was when I decided that I didn't think that should happen anymore, and was really hoping I could get good people in my corner, and I think I have. Well, and we got it to Washington, and you took it and ran with it, and we got it through. And our next step is on to the Senate.
Well, and it is there, and the bill hopefully will be taken up soon and passed. But, of course, the Texas legislature actually addressed it before the federal government, and Senator El Taif and others in East Texas, Brian Hughes and others got on board and were helping with the issue. And Chris Patty is from Marshall. It's his hometown, and he was really leads the charge in Austin, but that only deals with Texas. So it's an interstate commerce issue, and it's because of your leadership and your relentlessness that actually has gotten this to the point where it's about to become law. But Hank, I mean, my own daughters, I've got 3 of them. My wife and I, we taught them to dial 911, and that would not have done it if they had been in your granddaughter's situation. But go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Right now, obviously it hasn't become law, so this situation is still out there in a lot of places. And it wasn't just the number 9. Some hotels you have to dial an 8. Some you have to dial a 7. I stayed at a hotel in Waco that instructed its guests on the face of the phone to call 6821 in case of an emergency.
Wow. Well, can you hang on, Hank? We'll be right back. We have to take a hard break here. We'll be back with more Point of View and my friend Hank Hunt.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Is poverty in the world increasing or decreasing? Economists are discovering that it is substantially decreased. Kevin Hassett summarizes the data from economists who have been looking at the world distribution of income. By gathering the data from many different countries, they've been able to count the number of individuals who live on $1 per day or less, which is a key measure of poverty. According to their calculation, the number of people living in poverty so defined has plummeted. The number used to be 967 million in 1970. It is now about 350 million, and this trend is even more impressive when you consider that the world population has increased by 3 billion over the same period of time. So what is the reason for this reduction in poverty? Well, the biggest factor is the emergence of middle classes in previously poverty-stricken China and India. As capitalism has spread to other countries, there has also been a similar impact. Kevin Hassett makes a bold prediction. He believes that if this current trend continues for just 40 more years, poverty will have essentially been eradicated from the globe, and capitalism will have done it. Does capitalism reduce poverty more effectively than socialism? To answer that question, the authors reconstructed the distribution of income for the countries of the former Soviet Union. Back in the days of communism, poverty was much higher than it is today. More open societies with freer markets raised annual incomes. Kevin Hassett believes that the current criticisms of capitalism may be off target. He disagrees with those who have argued that the current financial crisis has served as proof that capitalism is a failed ideology. The work of these economists suggests that there are about 1 billion people whose lives prove otherwise. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Sony Pictures Home Entertainment, Risen, the resurrection as seen through the eyes of a non-believer. Available now on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
This is Point of View. This is Louis Gohmert, congressman from Texas. And I have a friend, just I think an American hero after the tragic loss of his daughter, Carrie Renee. And that's Hank Hunt. And Hank, we were talking about the efforts you had made to get the requirement that when somebody dials 911, they get emergency service. And I know you were driven by the thought that no one should ever have a grandchild looking up in their grandfather's or grandmother's or mother's or father's face and say, I did all I could. I dialed 911 and nothing happened. But because of what you did, the American Hotel and Lodging Association, even before the law has been passed by the Senate and come into effect, they got busy once this became an issue. And, they, like a lot of us, just didn't really think about it. But because of your push, most of the largest hotel member chains of the American Hotel and Lodging have already implemented the direct dial for 911, that it goes directly to emergency personnel. And, we were surprised when we got into it. The multi-line telephone system manufacturers and the installers, different entities, they were going, yeah, it's no big deal. It doesn't really cost anything different to just go ahead and make sure that when it's set up, you install it in such a way. 911 always goes to to emergency responders. But I'd also like to hear from you, Hank, on the people that you have found helpful along the way. And I know Chris Patty and Brian Hughes and Kevin Eltai here in Texas and the people, Senator Klobuchar is the lead sponsor on the bill in the Senate. But what other non-elected representatives have been helpful in this quest along the way?
Well, number one, my wife. Without her, I don't know where I'd be right now, and she gets the credit for the number one spot. I would have to say Mark Fletcher with Savaya Corporation has been key in this, been very instrumental in getting this where it is. He is the one that approached the FCC. He's reached out to hundreds of people, and he's a walking encyclopedia on telecommunications and 911 emergency procedures.
Well, he has been immensely helpful. You're right. I'm so glad you brought Mark up.
He is. And there's others with other companies that are helping us, Conveyant Technologies, Tim Kenyon, he's the owner of that one. Dan Wilson, another one who was with the Via Corporation at the time. You.
Well, but
you've been instrumental. I know you're an elected official, but I started this with a petition on that change.org, and it was addressed to you, and you answered.
Well,
and
it was a problem that I'd never thought about. So you're the real hero for bringing it to the forefront. Well, you had mentioned you were just in a hotel somewhere. Where'd you say you were when you saw the problem of getting through to 911 just recently?
It was in Waco.
In Waco, right. Mm-hmm. Well, do you mind mentioning the name of the hotel?
It was a Hampton.
In Hampton. Yeah, I love Hampton Inns. They're a terrific part of the Hilton chain. Well, that's
I brought it up to them, and it's been changed.
Isn't that fantastic? So you've got listeners all over the country right now, Hank, that can be touched by this, and they stay in hotels, motels all over the country. So we would hope the listeners will also be instrumental in helping get this fixed so that neither their child nor no one else's child will run into this problem. And as we've seen, installers have said, we've had a number of them say, well, look, if I get a call to come reprogram so that 911 goes through directly, we don't charge anything for that. That's just a public service. So wow. Well, I'm glad we didn't just leave that hanging, that there was a hotel in Waco that didn't have direct access. You brought it up, and they've already fixed it. So that is superb. So we're hoping that by you being on the show today and bringing further attention to this, Hank, that continues to be a legacy for your wonderful daughter and also for your grandchild. So that's very important. That. Thank you.
One thing I'd really like to say, if you don't mind, real
absolutely,
quick, for your listeners to educate your children, but also if you're traveling or you work in a business building or even a school, anywhere that has a multi-line telephone system, find out how you call 911, because chances are you won't be able to just dial the 3 digits 911. And the faceplate of the phones in hotels will usually give you directions. If they don't, I would bring it to the attention of the manager. And if you can't find out, notify me. I'll call them. And I have no problems doing that whatsoever. And it's just, and be careful in some hotels, because in this hotel where my daughter was killed, even if my granddaughter had read the placard on the front of the phone, it was a placard from the company that owned it before this company bought it. And it wouldn't have matched where she was to begin with.
Wow.
So it was a doomed situation from the beginning, I think, and perfect storm, so to speak. And you got it's on our police cars, our fire trucks, our ambulances. Teachers teach it, mothers and fathers teach it,
sure.
Grandparents do, and it's not 911 every time.
Well, it's getting to be more 911 because of your work and because of the loss of your daughter, Carrie Renee. So thank you for all that you have done to make this issue. There's no way to know. You'll never know this in this life the lives that will end up being saved simply because of your effort. You won't know. But you just surely, Hank, I hope and pray that you and your wife have a sense of peace about what you have done, and that Carrie Renee's loss, as horrible and tragic as it was, that others will be spared the horror of what you and your family has gone through. So we're very grateful to you, Hank. Thank you so much. And I look forward to celebrating with you when the Senate passes it and the president signs it into law. There's no reason that shouldn't happen. And as bipartisan as this is, it just should. So God bless you, Hank. You are blessing America. Thank you, friend.
Well, I appreciate it, Lou, and I look forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Now, folks, God bless you, Hank. What a great American, and what a great American story, as horribly as it started, that something good can be worked out of it. So, folks, when we come back in the next half hour, we're going to have an extraordinary guest. Of course, the issue of transgender is something that seems to be in the forefront all over the country. And I realize that this is a ticklish issue, and the presidential candidates have gotten involved, and states are getting involved. And many Christians have pointed to the very fact that if a company, a person, a state says we want males to go in male restrooms and females to go into female restrooms, they are built to accommodate a male restroom is built to accommodate a male, and a female is biologically built to, the female restrooms are built to accommodate them. And many have pointed out, this is evidence of how upside down things are in America. Well, I haven't heard this expert. I was told by a man who had a sex change operation that Dr. Paul McHugh from Johns Hopkins is probably the leading expert on transgender in the world. He's written an article that was published a couple of years ago in the Wall Street Journal about this issue. And it was reprinted because of how important the issue has all of a sudden become. And it's become a political hot issue. But we are going to have him on the show. And I would be willing to bet that it ends up causing many other shows to have him on. I will recommend him to my friends at Fox News and Fox Business. Because when someone who's had a sex change operation says this doctor knows more about this issue than anybody in the world, that's somebody we ought to look at. So we're taking a very hot issue, and I hope you will pray for us that this goes well. People are informed, so come on back. This is Point of View. I'm Louis Gohmert sitting in for Kirby Anderson.
Imagine it's January 2021. The president elected in 2016 has served 4 years. Tell me, what does the Supreme Court look like with maybe 2, 3, even 4 justices named by this next resident of the Oval Office? Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? Depending on the results in November, 4 years from now will look very different, and together we can influence those outcomes. We need each other. Together we are the Truth Team, and together we can honor Christ as we exercise our stewardship as believers and citizens. One way to make a difference is to visit pointofview.net and support the Truth Team, pointofview.net. Or give when you call 1-800-347-5151. The nation is so divided, we must be united. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
Hello, folks. Louis Gohmert sitting in for Kirby Anderson. And our next guest is a preeminent psychiatrist in the entire world. And as someone who we have a guest later who had a sex change operation, and he's the one that said, you really need to talk to Dr. Paul McHugh from Johns Hopkins Hospital. He, according to this person who'd had the sex change operation, he knows more about transgender than anybody. And as someone, I grew up in Mount Pleasant, Texas, and Dr. McKellar, I know he'd gotten a push from my mother, used to encourage me, Louis, I know you think you're supposed to go to law school, but you'd be such a good doctor. You got good grades. I can help you into Baylor. I'm on the board. Don't throw your life away. You could really help people if you would just go be a doctor. And I am so pleased that our guest is also the son of a high school teacher, graduated from Harvard in 1952, graduated from Harvard Medical School in 1956. In 1979, in his capacity as chair of the Department of Psychiatry, he ended the gender assignment surgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And when you do a fantastic job as psychiatrist in chief and you're still alive, they make you current distinguished service professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins. And that's what our guest, Dr. Paul McHugh, is. Dr. McHugh, welcome to Point of View. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. With the recommendation you got from somebody who had the sex change operation, we just really wanted to get you on the show and visit with you about this transgender issue. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman. You flatter me with all these statements. There are plenty of people who know as much as I do about transgenderism, but I have been studying it for a long time and thinking about it, and I'm surprised that fundamentally still confusion has not been resolved better. I think that's really the theme and the reason I was willing to talk with you.
Well, there is so much confusion about it, and you and I talked yesterday, and you brought up the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. Now we're in edition 5, and it changed the term gender identity disorder from DSM-4 to gender dysphoria. And the Oxford Dictionary says dysphoria is a state of unease or generalized dissatisfaction with life. And in this case, with gender, it would be the unease or generalized dissatisfaction with one's gender. But you brought up the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Index. I believe that's the MMPI, what it stands for. But and how Scale 5 explores very thoroughly one's feelings between masculine and feminine. Would you explain that?
Yes, my problem is with this word gender, Congressman. It was coined in this way, actually, by the Johns Hopkins psychologist John Money years ago to try to talk about some aspects of the way people feel about themselves. But really the word gender, in contrast, is now being used as a synonym for sex, and it sets in that way. I believe that gender should continue to have its old understanding and meaning. That is, your gender is masculine or feminine, your sex is male or female, man or woman, male or boy or girl. And because of these confusions, individuals now, particularly children who have masculine feelings when they're feminine, feminine feelings when they're masculine, begin to wonder whether they belong in the other sex. And all they are is individuals who we've known a long time. We've known tomboys a long time, and many girls who acted liked, climbing and
right.
And fishing and getting up in the treehouse and all turned out to be absolutely wonderful women, and very often continue to have similar sorts of interests of this sort, but are vigorous in their understanding of what their sex is, and would be offended if you thought that they were not women.
Well, when you brought that up, I started thinking about it, and it seems that probably every single person, human being, if they took that MMPI test, that at different times in their lives they would score differently on that fifth scale regarding masculine, feminine, wouldn't they?
They might. Their sex wouldn't change, and they might just, through their interests and the kinds of things that came to them and their encounters with other people. We're right in the middle right now, I believe, of a serious craze about this area, and young people in particular, people with great vulnerabilities from other sorts, their depressive states or concerns about the role that will be asked of them in their sex, begin to wonder and get from the internet encouragement with the idea that they could belong to another sex. And of course you can't. You can't, no matter what anyone says, you can't turn a boy into a girl or a girl into a boy. You can turn a boy into a more feminized boy, and you can hurt him in the process if you do surgery or hormones. And similarly with a girl. The DSM-5, if you look at it, when it's talking about gender dysphoria, does say that this dysphoric problem with boys, it persists in only between 2 and 20% of them. So 80 to 90% of these kids get over it if you leave them alone, and similarly with the girls. So what I've been saying abroad lately is we're very confused about this word gender, and sometimes it's acting as a synonym for sex, and people are confused about it. If you've seen one transgendered child, you've seen one transgendered child. We have no idea, really, what is provoking this in most of these children. We certainly know that in most of them, it's not a biological issue that is the impetus for their belief that
That's
they're
so important. Yeah.
The presumption is that there's some biological impetus that is driving these children to feel that they are of the opposite sex. But it turns out when you look at the science, that's not there. The impetus usually is a psychosocial one, and an issue of worry, or an issue of concern, an issue of vulnerability.
Well, the activists in this area are making it sound as if that, wow, we've learned so much more now. Go ahead and have the gender switch surgery. But I was noticing in your article that was published in the Wall Street Journal, and it's entitled Transgender Surgery Isn't the Solution. Right. I was shocked to read, you said, we at Johns Hopkins University, which in the 1960s was the first American medical center to venture into sex reassignment surgery, you launched a study in the 70s comparing the outcomes of transgendered people who had surgery with the outcomes of those who didn't. Most of the surgically treated patients, you say, described themselves as satisfied, but their subsequent psychosocial adjustments were no better than those who did not have the surgery. So Johns Hopkins, I guess, did you help lead on this, that stopped doing the sex reassignment surgery?
Yes, we stopped doing it for that reason. We thought that what was said to be the reason for them, that is we were going to make people psychosocially content and effective, didn't seem to work, at least by that data.
And that seems to have been borne out by this 2011 study in Sweden at the Karolinska Institute, you quote in your article, that you said it had the most illuminating results. And what did that show, Doctor?
Well, it showed that these patients who had sex reassignment surgery were still very distressed patients, and their suicide rate was 20 times that of comparable people in the Swedish population.
That's incredible.
It's an incredible kind of thing. These children and these adults are distressed people. There's no question about it. And we should be doing something to help them. But the idea that the best help for them is affirming their idea and doing surgery of them has not been tested in any way. These results from Sweden would make you think, gee, we have to compare it with the non-conforming treatment, and that's not being done. If anyone is interested in evidence-based medicine, they have to realize that the evidence for hormone assignment surgery, the evidence for this being good, is very low. Very low, because there is no comparison group that's being measured with another form of treatment other than affirmative
Doctor,
treatment.
we got a hard break. Can you stay around for the next segment? All right, awesome. Call 800-351-1212, and hopefully we can take some calls with Dr. McHugh. Come back. This is Point of View.
In the name of civil rights for transgenders, the White House wants men to feel free and comfortable walking into women's restrooms. Disagreeing with that policy does not mean you're against social justice for men who think they should be women. We should be more worried about stories like this one out of Chicago. Police there say a man choked an 8-year-old girl until she passed out in the bathroom of a Jason's Deli restaurant in Chicago's South Loop. Reports vary. Some networks reported her mom allowed her to go in there alone. One said her mother was in a stall, but when the girl screamed, the mom responded only to find a man carrying her unconscious daughter into a stall. This happened on May 7th. The perpetrator is obviously troubled. The little girl's life will never be the same. This is why we don't want men in girls' restrooms. Declarations are being made by governors against the administration's obvious overreach. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson advises schools to disregard the president's decree altogether. Alabama's Attorney General said, if the Obama administration tries to enforce this absurd edict, I will work with other attorneys general to challenge it. So what do we do? I live in Texas, and Texas is a good example of a state that's come out with a strong and reasoned response. Really, 3 responses. Some states will defy the directive, but first it's important to try to persuade the administration to reverse its instructions to open school bathrooms and locker rooms to this assault on privacy. Texas's Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said, we are looking at every pathway to resist the federal government. But he continued, at the end of the day, I believe, first we can get the administration to back off. The White House is saying to schools, if they don't follow this guideline, they'll withhold school funding. In Texas, half of education funding goes to the nutrition program for kids who qualify for a free lunch and a free breakfast. If the feds follow through, Dan Patrick says, we'll just say no to the money at the end of the day. The state will find the money elsewhere. What else is Texas doing? Preparing to take legal action. Attorney General Ken Paxton has sued the administration before. He says it had better prepare for yet another legal fight. North Carolina has already filed suit. Other attorneys general will join this effort. Finally, Texas will look at passing protective legislation. Lieutenant Governor Patrick told the Daily Signal, I've asked the school districts already to stand down. Superintendents not to react, not to initiate policy. There are only a couple of weeks left in school. Let's work through this in the summer. Texas won't be alone. Dan Patrick told the Daily Signal, I'm going to urge that there is a total resistance, state by state. No state should submit to this. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hello, this is Point of View. This is Louis Gohmert, Congressman from Texas, on with, though he's very modest, when you have someone who's had a sex change operation say this is the best expert on transgender issues. We're thrilled to have him on the radio, and I hope you don't mind, Dr. McHugh, but I can't help but believe with the wisdom that you bring to this issue. I mean, I learned so much from reading your article in the Wall Street Journal. I had no idea that a hospital on the cutting edge of this, the first one to start doing these sex change operations, had quit doing it. But, Doctor, you say in your article, make many profound points, but one of them, you're talking about this argument that, wow, nobody should try to have someone who holds a feeling of being possibly another gender dissuaded out of it. You said, with this argument, advocates for the transgendered have persuaded several states, including California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, to pass laws barring psychiatrists, even with parental permission, from striving to restore natural gender feelings to a transgender minor. And then you said that government can intrude into parents' rights to seek help in guiding their children, indicates how powerful these advocates have become. And then you say how to respond. Tell us how people should respond to this issue, especially if they have a child that's acting out a bit, that perhaps in a different gender.
Well, each one of them needs to be studied for themselves and the individual. As I say, the idea that there's a biological impetus behind this and therefore it has to be conformed to is not correct. What needs to be done is each of the children has to be studied for himself or herself to try to understand what it is that has prompted this idea that they belong in the other sex. And very often, if you continue to work to try to show them that with the worries that they have about their future can be managed in a natural way, you can persuade them ultimately and convince them that their gender is the same as their sex. And, in fact, this has been demonstrated in a lot of places, but the best person who demonstrated this was a person who I think knows more about transgender than I do, and that was Ken Zucker, up in Toronto, who was a investigator and therapist. And he thought, again, that what he refers to as gender non-conforming behavior was due to their life circumstances. And he followed up over 25 girls, and in the process, got 22 of them to come to agree that and give up their fears that they were boys. So we know this can be done. The real problem now is that it's hard to get anybody anywhere to do comparative studies between those who want to use biology like hormones to affect the puberty of these children and those who would want to use the Zucker approach of helping them to abandon their non-conforming behavior and compare them the way we do with anything else. The commitment and the belief, both at the level of many members of the profession, but also obviously in relationship to law enforcement in states like New Jersey, they're not going to let you do that, let alone find any study that would permit them to have what we want for everything else. If you went to a paper like the Hayes Directory, which in 2014, it's a directory of how much we know about treatments and whether we should use them. They study antibiotics, and they study heart medicines, and they study cancer medicines. And they went and looked at all of the treatments for gender dysphoria that were hormonal and biochemical. And every one of them, they said, the quality of evidence here is very low. You wouldn't give a person an aspirin with that quality of evidence on the record. And the idea that you'd give her hormones and stop their puberty and even do surgery that will stunt their growth and might sterilize these children, it's not right. And
Doctor, you make the point, and actually it's just so ironic that we have had people push through laws saying you can't have a psychiatrist or psychologist, a counselor, talk to someone and try to change the thinking of a child that may not be what the counselor or psychologist believes appropriate. You said this: psychiatrists obviously must challenge the solipsistic concept that what's in the mind cannot be questioned. Disorders of consciousness, after all, you say, represent psychiatry's very domain. Declaring them off limits would eliminate the field of psychiatry. I thought that is so ironic.
Did you really? I like that. I'm very glad you thought that, Congressman, because it's really quite clear that we spend most of our time trying to talk to people about how their ideas are misdirected or in error, and the idea that in this area we can't because somehow or another we'd be abusive of that is to eliminate the field. I'm glad you thought that.
Well, it is just so profound, so profound. Well, the problem is it is such a basic, simple, logical statement that sometimes those are the things that are lost when we try to overcomplicate things.
Right. This is what I'm saying now to everybody. We don't know the best way to treat and understand these children, okay? We do know that they are suffering and that they will suffer even more if they persist in this. We should let people everywhere do whatever they think is the best for that individual child, and then bring back the experience that they've had in helping that child. If they think affirmative therapy is what they're going to do for this child one, they should follow it and see if that child does as well as they think they're going to do. Other people who want to use non-conforming things by saying you'll go to the bathroom of your regular sex and you'll wear trousers if you're a boy, they should be able to do that too and report back to us what happens. And eventually real control studies can be done, and we can answer this question in a way that we've answered other medical questions. Right now, we're running on ideology.
Well, our time is running out, and I'm not going to have time to bring the listener on, but I have here on the screen that Jerry has called and is raising the issue of whether or not having a masculine role model in the home would help in the development of a child. We know that
we don't know the answer to that. It's probably likely that in some situations, depending upon how that masculine role model treats a boy, that it may well be good for him. On the other hand, if he mistreats the boy, and we discover that could produce a psychosocial conflict against masculinity. You see, we need to study these cases individually because we don't know the answer to these obvious and logical questions.
Well, it was interesting in reading Steve Mansfield's book, Lincoln's Struggle with God. He started out as an infidel. He bragged in his 20s. He did not have a good role model. He had an abusive father, and
he had a wonderful stepmother, though.
Yes,
Sarah Bush was a wonderful woman.
Yeah. So it's amazing how those things really can affect. And again, as you've said, if you say that someone cannot get counseling on this issue, you might as well eliminate psychiatry altogether because that's what your field is.
Right,
that's exactly. Very profound. Well, in the last few seconds of having you on the show, it sounds like that you're basically saying there are mainly Christians listening to the show, but others that what Christians are taught to love each other and care for each other is basically the best thing you can do.
Well, yes, that's what we're doing. We want to wish each other well. We wish each other well. And in order in medicine to do that, we need to have comparative studies.
Thank you, Doctor. This is Point of View. That was a profound psychiatrist, Dr. Paul McHugh. Come on back. We've got more.
From Sony Pictures Home Entertainment comes Risen on digital and Blu-ray. The biblical story of the resurrection as told through the eyes of a non-believer.
The body has vanished.
His tomb is empty.
Available now on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital. Risen, rated PG-13. If you're prone to depression or melancholy, you might want to avoid the evening news these days. The only way to dispel the encroaching darkness is to raise up a light. Evil shouts in the streets, and we urge you to support Point of View as we spread truth and light over the airwaves. Join the Truth Team. Visit pointofview.net and click on Become a Monthly Partner. God's grace is still available for America. Help us to proclaim it. Call 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or again, give online at pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Hi, folks. This is Louis Gohmert sitting in for Kirby Anderson, and welcome back to Point of View. Wow, I wish so many more people could hear Dr. Paul McHugh talk so logically about the issue of transgender or gender dysphagia or dysphoria. But we have now a guest. He had suffered from gender identity disorder, as the DSM-4 had called it, when he was a child. And he was married, a successful businessman. He underwent cosmetic surgery to alter his sex at age 42. And then he said surgery and hormone treatment failed to address his underlying psychological issues. So after undergoing therapy and attaining sobriety, he turned his life to Christ. And Walt Heyer says he was able to accept his biology, return to living as a man. He's now 74 years old and married to his second wife for 18 years. He's an author. He's a public speaker who devotes his life to helping others who regret their choice to undergo what is known as, quote, gender reassignment surgery, unquote. He's a non-denominational believer. He told his story in the novel Kid Dakota and The Secret at Grandma's House, and in his autobiography, A Transgender's Faith. He also spreads awareness through his blog, and I would really commend this, Walt Heyer, that's WaltHeyer.com, and his website, sexchangeregret.com, sexchangeregret.com. Walt Heyer, I hope you are just overwhelmed at your website and through your blog by people after this interview. Somewhere around 330 or 340 radio stations across the country are carrying this interview. And so, Walt, I am so grateful for you to come on, for your courage, for your willingness to stand up and speak what currently, hopefully eventually it will, but currently it is not considered appropriate thinking. But Walt Heyer, welcome to being on Point of View.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Walt, what an amazing biography you have. The search, well, most of us who have become Christians, we have different stories in our background, and like Dr. McHugh was talking about, we're all different individuals, and that's the way God takes each one of us. But could you give us a little more of your background and what you'd gone through to get to this current point today?
Yeah, you did a good job of covering it. You did some research. It was quite on. So, I think what happened was after I underwent the reassignment surgery at age 42, by then I was divorced. I was an executive with a national operations job with a large corporation. I began to study psychology at the University of Santa Cruz, and I came across a lot of research information that started leading me to do deeper research, and found out that transgenders are not born. They're actually, it's a developmental disorder, usually from a vast range of what they call comorbid disorders. Gender dysphoria is just really an umbrella term to caution us about the fact that there are underlying psychological and or psychiatric disorders that exist in a person who's struggling with their identity. So, as I began to study this and realized that I was not born that way, that it was as a result of being sexually molested and cross-dressed by my grandmother, which, once we introduce a child, as I was at the age of 4, to cross-dressing, what we're really doing is fracturing and breaking their core identity. I mean, it's child abuse on any level to suggest to a child. A 4-year-old does not know what gender dysphoria is, but we're introducing it to them by giving a boy a dress and telling them to identify as a different gender. So we're really in the throes of some deep problems with our ideology about transgenderism, because transgenders are not born. There is absolutely no way to, when somebody identifies as a transgender, for them to test and actually prove what the person is saying is true. But we're giving them hormone blockers or hormone therapy. We're cutting off perfectly good body parts and introducing them to a new gender identity. So once I began to study this, and now, as you mentioned on my blog, I see all the research studies say that, it's not a brain disorder. There are no hormonal differences, that they are perfectly normal males who either had some kind of separation anxiety or dissociative disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive, even body dysmorphic disorder. So, but see, what happens, Louis, is that nobody sits down with these people who says they're transgender and asks them about their childhood, what may have happened to cause them to have the onset of gender dysphoria. They just assume that they're transgender and lead them down that path. That's
a great point.
The tragedy.
It is a tragedy, and if we really care about the individual, as Dr. McHugh was saying, we need to treat them as an individual. But you make such a great point. This is something for which there is no evidence. If someone is a perfectly normal, mentally and physical male, and they want to say, I believe I'm a female, should be a female, I'm going into the girls' dressing room or restroom, there is no way to prove with evidence scientifically that they really do think they're a woman or they really don't think that they're a woman. I mean, and when we get into an area and say we are going to accept things as being scientifically true when there's no scientific evidence that it's true, we're in big trouble. But I just love so much what I perceived of your heart and your caring more about people than some of the activists that say you can never take a child to have a counselor talk to them. We're going to have 2 segments, and I hope that you will be able to hang on for the second half of the half hour. Would you be open to taking some calls, Walt?
Absolutely. I'd love to.
Well, the number to call is 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. And we'll get to hear more in the bottom of this hour or half hour from Walt Heyer. And again, Walt Heyer, WaltHeyer.com, or the website sexchangeregret.com. But this is a guy who's not just speaking from some general idea he's had. He has lived it. He's been through it. And Walt, I hope you don't mind. I am very proud to call you my brother in Christ and to be your brother and be your brother, sister, whatever you want to call it. You're obviously a wonderful person, and we look forward to having your calls. 800-351-1212. This is Point of View. Come on back. This is going to be great.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Is poverty in the world increasing or decreasing? Economists are discovering that it is substantially decreased. Kevin Hassett summarizes the data from economists who have been looking at the world distribution of income. By gathering the data from many different countries, they've been able to count the number of individuals who live on $1 per day or less, which is a key measure of poverty. According to their calculation, the number of people living in poverty so defined has plummeted. The number used to be 967 million in 1970. It is now about 350 million. And this trend is even more impressive when you consider that the world population has increased by 3 billion over the same period of time. So what is the reason for this reduction in poverty? Well, the biggest factor is the emergence of middle classes in previously poverty-stricken China and India. As capitalism has spread to other countries, there has also been a similar impact. Kevin Hassett makes a bold prediction. He believes that if this current trend continues for just 40 more years, poverty will have essentially been eradicated from the globe, and capitalism will have done it. Does capitalism reduce poverty more effectively than socialism? To answer that question, the authors reconstructed the distribution of income for the countries of the former Soviet Union. Back in the days of communism, poverty was much higher than it is today. More open societies with freer markets raised annual incomes. Kevin Hassett believes that the current criticisms of capitalism may be off target. He disagrees with those who have argued that the current financial crisis has served as proof that capitalism is a failed ideology. The work of these economists suggests that there are about 1 billion people whose lives prove otherwise. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Sony Pictures Home Entertainment, Risen, the resurrection as seen through the eyes of a non-believer. Available now on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
This is Point of View. This is Louis Gohmert, a congressman from Texas, sitting in for my dear friend Kirby Anderson, and I have just a wonderful guest, a Christian, just a caring person, Walt Heyer, and that's Heyer, Walt Heyer. You want to go to waltheyer.com for his blog, his website, sexchangeregret.com. Walt, I've got a question for you, and then sure, we can take a call from a caller, mm-hmm, and for anybody else who wants to call in, 800-351-1212. Walt, mm-hmm, when I was a judge in Tyler, Texas, and that's still my hometown, I had a lot of trials, sexual molestation, sexual abuse, sexual assault, and it was intriguing because so often when we had witnesses who had become adults and were testifying about their molestation by, particularly I'm talking about boys, when they were adults, and this happened when they were young boys, that they were molested, then they, as adults, believed that they were homosexuals and identified as homosexuals. And it just seemed that these, when they were very young boys, somebody molested them by manipulating them. They knew how to get them excited and make them feel pleasure. And I just wonder if that molestation had never taken place and they had never had someone engaging in homosexual activity make them feel pleasure, would they have ever thought for a moment that engaging in homosexual lifestyle was what they should do. And, you don't know. And like Dr. McHugh is talking about transgender, we've not had enough studies in these areas because the LGBT community has made it politically so costly if you bring this issue up. What are your thoughts about that, Walt?
Well, I can only tell you from the testimonies of people that I know. I mean, I travel.
Well, and from your own experience, you were talking about being dressed up as a girl.
Sure. Well, what I'm saying is that from my own life and from the testimonies, they all talk about people that end up either homosexual or transgender, actually being abused or had some very traumatic event. Now, many of the people. It wasn't so pleasurable, but it was so traumatic that they no longer want to be who they are because that's the person who was abused, and that's where we develop dissociative disorders. It's a way of escaping the person who was sexually abused.
That's great point. Great point. We have a caller, Nick from South Carolina. Nick, you're on Point of View with Walt Heyer. You have a question, something you would like to ask or point to make? Nick?
Louis. Yeah, Louis. I was several years ago in I think it was the Scientific World or something like that, magazine, that there was a story about a Central American country where there had been several cases of children that were born. And because the sex organs had not been fully developed, they thought they were girls. And they were raised as girls until puberty. And at puberty, the genitalia started to develop, and they could see that they were males. And then they started dressing and acting like men, and eventually went on to marry and have their own families with no side effects.
Well, Walt, I don't know if you'd ever heard of that situation.
Oh, yeah. This is something that the audience really needs to know about. That person would not be called a transgender.
Okay.
What we have, anytime there is developmental issues as far as the sexual organs or things that they can actually physically see, those individuals are called intersex. And that is a whole different thing from transgenders. Those people actually have identifiable medical issues, and that's why they actually remove them from the transgender population and identify them as intersex. So what happens today is we get them confused. Do not conflate an intersex person with developmental problems with their genitalia with a transgender, because transgenders do not have any of those developmental problems whatsoever.
Got you. Well, thank you for making that distinction. And if you would like to talk to Walt Heyer, the number is 800-351-12. Could you relate to us some experiences you've had in working with people without, giving their identity? Sure. I know you wouldn't do that, but experiences that you've had in working with people through your blog and through your website, sexchangeregret.com.
Right. I'd be happy to. I just got a note from a guy today who, after 10 years, said that the feeling's gone. He just no longer... He had surgery 10 years ago, became a female, and he's writing me now asking for help on how to transition back. And so he said it's just no longer there. And he had these very strong feelings. He had all the dysphoria. He was diagnosed properly, went through all the proper protocols. But here he is at this point in his life saying, I want to go back, and he's asking me how to do that. And what's interesting about that, Louis, is that Dr. Harry Benjamin was the founder that actually coined the term transsexual and started a clinic in the early 70s for helping people transition from mostly males from male to female. And there was a doctor working there named Charles Dillenfeld, who administered hormone therapy to some 500 transgenders over a 6-year period. And he quit that clinic because what he said he found, and it's the same, I want to mention it because the same thing we find today, 50 years later, what he found was, and his quote was, there are too many suicides and too much unhappiness, and 80% of the people who think they're transgenders should not do it because they're really not, and the 20% who may fall into a category that could be transgender, it will only be a temporary reprieve that will come about, it will end between 10 and 15 years. So as I read this guy's note today, 10 years afterward, and remembered what Dillenfeld had written, Dillenfeld was seeing this right away, and it's not a lifelong fix for a mental disorder. This is a mental disorder. Many of the people do not understand that there is a sexual fetish disorder that's a great part of transgenderism called autogynephilia. And what it is the individual actually falls in love with their appearance of being a female and gets sexually aroused by their appearance from seeing themselves in a mirror. So in effect, they fall in love. They're having a love affair with themselves being a transgender.
Wow. Well, until you recommended Dr. McHugh, I had not read his article, but where he quotes this study in 2011 from Sweden, from the Karolinska Institute. Man, they follow hundreds of people who had sex reassignment surgery. And Walt, you brought it up, but I would think when you have a scientific study that shows that if you do this surgery, the person you're trying to help is 20 times more likely to take their own life, then you would ultimately do what Johns Hopkins did and say, we can't keep doing that surgery when we're increasing. First, do no harm, as we know. Physicians are supposed to take the oath, or used to. Man, I would think that any psychiatrist, any surgeon would have to look very, very closely at that if you thought you were going to help somebody by making them 20 times more likely to take their lives. So, Walt, I just thank God that you're not one of that 20 times more likely. But let me ask you, did you ever have thoughts of taking your own life?
I attempted suicide.
I didn't know that, Walt. I didn't know that.
And so what we have here, that study was a 30-year-long study that McHugh was talking about. So, suicide's a big part of the transgender community.
Walt, you have helped a lot of people, the masses that have been listening. Thank you for being with us. Walt Heyer, this is Point of View. Come on back. We have a great finish.
This election has been one of the most divisive in history. Even close friends have been driven apart because they dared support the wrong candidate. Jesus said the world would know his disciples by how they love each other. I'm asking you to do something today as a sign of unity. Step up and support the Truth Team at Point of View Radio so we can be a beacon of truth in 2016 and beyond. America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. Visit pointofview.net. Make a difference by giving as generously as you can, or call us 800-347-5151. Our next president will likely appoint at least 2 Supreme Court justices, maybe even more. We need each other, and I believe that we need Point of View, and Point of View needs you to invest in the mission. Please join us today, pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
Hello, folks. Back at Point of View, Kirby Anderson's show. Sometimes Penna Dexter sits in, and both of them have just such fantastic voices. But you've got Louis Gohmert, a member of Congress from Texas, and I'm just thrilled to be sitting in for Kirby today. And in the last hour and a half, we have had phenomenal guests, and we're about to have one as well in this segment of the show. He is a strong Christian, but this is a guy, Lieutenant General and retired, William Jerry Boykin. He is now with the Family Research Council as Executive Vice President, but he was one of the original members of the U.S. Army Delta Force. He was privileged to ultimately command the Delta Force in combat operations. And later on, he commanded all of the Army's Green Berets, as well as the Special Warfare Center and the school. And in all, General Boykin spent 36 years in the Army, serving his last 4 years as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. He's an ordained minister and a passion for spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ and encouraging Christians to become warriors in God's kingdom. He and his wife, Ashley, enjoyed spending time with their 5 children and the growing number of grandchildren. But I'm just thrilled that I get to count him as a friend. I just think the world of the man. It's great when you love somebody and you can respect them all at the same time, and that's the way I feel about General Jerry Boykin. General, welcome to Point of View.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman, and you are indeed a friend as well as a battle buddy.
Well, thank you. Well, my 4 years in the Army were 78 through 80 or to 82, and most of us never saw any type of combat, 78 to 82. The only thing during that time, my 4 years of active duty, that came close was the operation you were on. And I know this is not going to be the subject of our discussion, but I hope you can stay through both segments so we can talk about a number of things. But will you be able to be here with us for both segments?
Absolutely. I'll be here as long as you need.
Well, I just want to go back. There's some that still point to how feckless the military was back in the 70s. And actually, I had a friend, Congressman Steve King. He's a friend of yours as well. As Steve was saying, we were having a hearing about IRS Commissioner Koskinen and how he is obfuscated. He appears certainly to have lied. He's helped cover up through the IRS. He's not been forthcoming and truthful. And we had a hearing about all of these things he's done and hasn't done. And the Democrats on our committee were covering for him this week. They just constantly were trying to defend him. And I pointed out that when Bush was president, and I had a problem with one of our people that it was either incompetence or a lack of truth, I called the White House and said, this is indefensible. We can't defend this guy anymore. And I'm waiting for some Democrat on one of our committees or in the House at large to stand up and have that same kind of righteous indignation about the lack of truth. But the feeling was and this is what Steve said, if Republicans had rallied around and defended Nixon's legal violations, ethical violations, he would never have been removed from office. Well, actually, he resigned before the impeachment trial, but he would still have finished his term, which would have allowed us to finish more effectively in Vietnam. But the way the liberals forced the ending so abruptly in Vietnam, and then the next rally was the new Delta Force, in which you were a part of. ended up being unable to finish the mission and rescue our over 50 people that were held captive by Tehran. That's still being used by radical Islamists to recruit. And I've talked to you about that. And I was never in Vietnam, but I was at Fort Benning when there was a person there who had said, look, that was a joint planning by a number of, all of our branches, and that Carter had wanted a proposal. We knew where the hostages were. How can we go get them? And this person said that they put their heads together and said, okay, we need to go in with 12 choppers, meet at a staging area 500 miles or so inside Iran. And the reason they wanted 12 helicopters is they thought since these engines would be going across hundreds of miles of sand, that there was probably a 50% loss rate of those helicopters. And as you had told me, you didn't know about the planning, but you knew that when you got to the staging area, when the last chopper arrived, if you didn't have 6, then it was an abort situation. And this friend said the Carter administration said, no, 12 would look like an invasion, so let's scale it back to 8. They were pushed, no, let's do 12 because we may lose 6 choppers. That detail, the way you've confirmed the rest, what happened after that, and I haven't had anybody confirm that yet. But you guys were so well trained. You were there in the desert, hundreds of miles from any friendlies in Iran, and you knew where the hostages were. If you'd had the 6 chopper land there, and you apparently met a C-130, and what else was there that you were meeting in the desert? You recall?
No, we actually had 6 C-130s that landed there.
Wow.
Yeah, 3 of which were just full of fuel for the helicopters, and then 3 of which were, they were. The other 3 were full of the Delta Force troops.
Gotcha.
But Congressman, you are absolutely right. Look, we asked for more than 8 helicopters. We wanted as many as we could get, given what they call the OR rate, or the operational readiness rate.
Right.
And you nailed it. I mean, helicopters flying in sand, flying in an environment where they're flying very, very low over sand, they are going to ingest a lot of that sand, and it takes a toll on those helicopters. And when they got there, they only landed with 6, and then one of them broke after they landed, so we were down to 5. Yeah, and the 5 was not adequate for us to go forward and get all of our troops in, but more importantly, get all the hostages out.
Right, and so if I recall correctly, you had said, of course, people remember we left. There were people that died out there because of the accident that happened during the abort, and that. Tell us what they believe happened with the chopper that ended up having the blade cut through the one of the C-130s.
Well, again, it's an issue of sand as well as just darkness. And when the helicopter had refueled, he was positioned behind the C-130 with long hoses running out the back of the C-130, and they refueled him. And then when he lifted off to reposition in order to load troops, he lifted off, and as he lifted off, the sand came up, and the pilot went what they call vertigo, or he lost his equilibrium. And he had only lifted up, maybe 20 feet above the Earth's surface, and he lost it and slid to his right and crashed right on top of the C-130 and his rotor blades. He landed sort of on the left wing, and his rotor blades just sliced through the C-130, and 5 men were killed in the C-130, and they were all air crew, and then 3 in the helicopter itself. although the pilot and the co-pilot escaped with significant burns. 3 others died there in the back. But look, the point that needs to be made on this whole thing is Jimmy Carter was inept. Jimmy Carter had let the military atrophy under his leadership to the point that we were not fully ready to go and do this mission because he hadn't put the priority on military readiness that he should have. And the only bright spot of this whole thing was that operation. The failure of that operation brought down his administration and brought on Ronald Reagan.
General, we'll be right back with more Point of View. Stay tuned. This is going to be awesome. You've got to see the finish. Listen to us.
In the name of civil rights for transgenders, the White House wants men to feel free and comfortable walking into women's restrooms. Disagreeing with that policy does not mean you're against social justice for men who think they should be women. We should be more worried about stories like this one out of Chicago. Police there say a man choked an 8-year-old girl until she passed out in the bathroom of a Jason's Deli restaurant in Chicago's South Loop. Reports vary. Some networks reported her mom allowed her to go in there alone. One said her mother was in a stall, but when the girl screamed, the mom responded only to find a man carrying her unconscious daughter into a stall. This happened on May 7th. The perpetrator is obviously troubled. The little girl's life will never be the same. This is why we don't want men in girls' restrooms. Declarations are being made by governors against the administration's obvious overreach. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson advises schools to disregard the president's decree altogether. Alabama's Attorney General said, "If the Obama administration tries to enforce this absurd edict, I will work with other attorneys general to challenge it." So what do? I live in Texas, and Texas is a good example of a state that's come out with a strong and reasoned response. Really, 3 responses. Some states will defy the directive, but first it's important to try to persuade the administration to reverse its instructions to open school bathrooms and locker rooms to this assault on privacy. Texas's Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said, "We are looking at every pathway to resist the federal government." But he continued, "At the end of the day, I believe first we can get the administration to back off." The White House is saying to schools if they don't follow this guideline, they'll withhold school funding. In Texas, half of education funding goes to the nutrition program for kids who qualify for a free lunch and a free breakfast. If the feds follow through, Dan Patrick says, we'll just say no to the money at the end of the day. The state will find the money elsewhere. What else is Texas doing? Preparing to take legal action. Attorney General Ken Paxton has sued the administration before. He says it had better prepare for yet another legal fight. North Carolina has already filed suit. Other attorneys general will join this effort. Finally, Texas will look at passing protective legislation. Lieutenant Governor Patrick told the Daily Signal, "I've asked the school districts already to stand down. Superintendents not to react, not to initiate policy. There are only a couple of weeks left in school. Let's work through this in the summer." Texas won't be alone. Dan Patrick told the Daily Signal, "I'm going to urge that there is a total resistance, state by state. No state should submit to this." For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hi, this is Louis Gomer, sitting in for Kirby Anderson at Point of View, and all across the country, we're glad you joined in because the guest is just a phenomenal American hero, General Jerry Boykin. And I want to get to the situation where you were fired by Hampden Sydney College, General. But before that, there was a movie, Black Hawk Down, and you were portrayed in that movie because since Delta Force was created, you've basically been a part of most all special ops until you actually retired from the military. And that was during the Clinton administration, correct? That Black Hawk Down
Yes, that
scenario?
was during the Clinton administration. And, oh, by the way, there are similarities between that and Jimmy Carter's.
Well, see, that's why I was going there, General, is because, again, the Clinton administration bragged that they were the first administration that actually reduced the size of government, but all they did was reduce the military. The rest of the government grew bigger. The military got smaller. But, General, I got to tell you, I would not go see Black Hawk Down at the movie theater. I wouldn't rent it on video. I knew enough about it that I knew it would gall me so much to see our troops in harm's way and not getting all that they needed. And you were doing absolutely everything you could from a command standpoint. But again, just in a nutshell, what do you see was the major problem that created that disaster?
It was political decisions made by the Clinton White House that denied us the AC-130 gunships, which would have been a game changer for us. We knew that fighting street to street was going to be a very difficult situation, and we needed overhead cover. We couldn't fire artillery or mortars into the city to break contact if we got in a tight spot. And we needed AC-130s. They fire 105 from right over the target. And we were denied that because it was considered too provocative. And, when we got in that big firefight on the 3rd of October, 1993, we were surrounded. We were surrounded by tens of thousands of wild-eyed, drug-crazed Somalis that wanted to kill an American. And we had no fire support beyond just the little helicopters that we had there. That AC-130 would have made a huge difference for us.
Well, and this that also occurred in Afghanistan when we had the largest loss of life of SEAL team members. Yep. When I've read the testimony of pilots on the C-130 gunship, and it is extraordinary to see what a C-130 gunship can do in just annihilating problems in an area. But they saw these guys moving in military formation and getting to a point that they could launch rocket-propelled grenades or SAM missiles, and they watched them, and they were told they couldn't take them out, and there might be civilians hit, and then they watched them take down our helicopter with the SEAL team members on it, and then they were not allowed to take them out even after they killed our Americans. But anyway, General, you are such an American hero. You're such an American treasure, and you had been teaching at Hampden-Sydney College in Virginia, in addition to being on the Family Research Council staff, and you had made statements about transgender restrooms, correct?
That's correct. I've been teaching there since I retired. I teach on Monday 2 classes of leadership and ethics, and I made a comment in Orlando at Matt Staver's conference there that exhorting people to stand up against these bathroom, and we really should say shower and locker room bills, because it includes showers and locker rooms. And I said, this is wrong. It's immoral, and we should stand against this. And the first man that goes in my daughter's bathroom isn't going to have to worry about surgery. Well, the whole audience knew that I was joking, and it was a soldier talking. And but of course, the LGBT community came after me with a vengeance, saying that I was encouraging people to commit violence against transgenders. I never even used the term transgender. I never said anything about transgenders, but obviously I was saying that to emphasize the fact that this is insanity to let men go in women's bathrooms. It's a height of disrespect for women. And with the pressure that was put on the college, they decided that they would not renew my contract after 9 years. And but let me say, this is a good college. This is a really good college. It's one of 2 men's colleges in America. And it is a good school, but it's like every other college and university in the country today. They're under tremendous pressure from the LGBT community. And in this case, they made a knee-jerk decision which they ultimately reversed, and I want to applaud them for realizing that there are a whole lot of Americans that just simply don't support this kind of thing. And
well,
I think
it did take a lot of courage for them to reverse their decision. You don't. A lot of times you see a school make a mistake and then they don't have the courage to stand up and reverse it, as this one did. But General, the reason we've gotten to where we are is because people have not come close to having your kind of courage. And for the last half of the 20th century, we had Christians across the country who felt like people I grew up with and said, look, I don't care what the government does as long as they stay out of my business. And if you don't care what the government does, not only do they not stay out of your business, they take your lives over. And that's what's happened. And we have got to get Christians back involved in this little experiment in a democratic republic. And what people across this country don't realize, they think, well, I've never served in the military. Look, they're part of the government. They're part of the government. And when they don't go out and show up on hiring day, or election day, if you rather, and have already reviewed the candidates, their backgrounds, who's going to take office, and make sure we hire the best servants, then they are letting this country down. And, it is how we've gotten in the trouble that we have been, so that you have legislators, you have dictators who are supposed to be executive office holders who are now dictating and trying to be politically correct, all to the damage, as we'd heard earlier during the show, from a doctor from Johns Hopkins and from a sex change operation patient, now looking back and say what a mistake that was. And I think a lot of the suffering that's occurred has been because good people like yourself, who've always stood up for what you believed, good people have not been standing up and following your example. So I just really thrilled to have you on the show. You are an American icon. You're American treasure. And of course, you're no stranger to having the leftists come after you. In fact, under the Bush administration, wasn't it weren't you speaking in a church and asked, how did we get to Baghdad so fast? And you said something like, our God was stronger than their God, and the left went nuts. Wasn't it something like that?
Yeah, well, I was actually reflecting on an incident in Mogadishu during the Black Hawk Down events, where we captured a warlord that said we would never capture him because Allah would protect him. And I just simply said to him, you underestimated our God. And then I made a statement to a church group that said I knew my God was bigger than his. Well, that didn't pass the PC test either. But, hey, Congressman, this is a stewardship issue, and Christians have to be good stewards.
General, you have been a great steward. We're down to 5 seconds. Thank you so much, General Jerry Boykin. You're a hero. You're a treasure. This is Point of View. Thank you, thank God, and thank you for joining us today, and thank the staff here at Point of View.
Jonah is really strange. God said there were 120,000 people in Nineveh who didn't know their right hand from their left. And yet today in America, many of our major corporations and politicians are fighting a war to permit men to use women's showers and bathrooms. Once you deny God as the measure of all things, you can't even recognize the most basic realities. America is in a battle for its sanity and survival. We need strong voices to tell the truth. We need Point of View. Become a partner in this important mission of speaking truth in love. Please, today is the day. Click the Join the Truth Team button at pointofview.net. Choose your level of giving and be an important part of the team bringing America the truth she so desperately needs. Take that step. Pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.